Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Eric Kim, and I am part of the Channels and Alliances team here at Cycode. As we all know, AI has expanded our attack surface much faster than traditional point solutions can track. Managing this shift requires an integrated security fabric where pipeline controls, human insight, and product visibility constantly reinforce each other. Today, we're going to look at what genuine security integration looks like from code to production. I'm joined by two fantastic experts to break this down with us. Kyle Metivier is a product manager at HackerOne, and Crystal Morin is a senior cybersecurity strategist at Sysdig. Kyle and Crystal, it's great to have you both with us, and we really appreciate the partnership. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So, Kyle, let's start with you. Just a quick question to kind of set the stage for where we are now. AI is accelerating development, but is it accelerating security at the same pace? Where are organizations most exposed today that they weren't 2 years ago?
Sure. I think the answer to your first question is that it is absolutely accelerating security at the same pace. If not, it feels like everything is a little bit more urgent. And I think an interesting answer to your second question is around where organizations are most exposed today, where they weren't 2 years ago, is actually that they're exposed in exactly the same places that they were 2 years ago. It's just that the cost to reach and exploit those exposures has significantly reduced with the introduction of AI. And that has really expanded the attack surface and what we're considering as exploitable. So I think that it is absolutely speeding up security, both in the ways that we're responding to and building products. But I think that organizations, for the most part, the exposures and exploitations that are being taken advantage of have existed for a long time, and there have been ways to discover and remediate them. But for the most part, they haven't had to be prioritized because of the cost to get there.
That makes a lot of sense. Crystal, what's your take on this?
I agree. I think security is also accelerating at the same pace. I would say we aren't implementing security quite fast enough, though, and not necessarily making all the right choices during security implementation, which, like Kyle said, we're making some wrong choices that leads to misconfigurations, the same misconfigurations that we've seen in the last 2 years. We're still seeing them now. Um, but unlike cloud, say a decade ago when we first introduced cloud and started moving from on premise to cloud security, and we had no idea what we were getting into. Now with AI, we tabletopped AI security. We knew what we were getting into. We understood the risks of AI and AI security. I think the exposure with AI right now is in trust boundaries. The credentials, the CI/CD pipelines, and the service connections, that's where our exposure lies. And we're giving a lot. We don't have the right visibility or the right reaction time right now. And that's kind of where our weak point is.
Gotcha. I think that makes a lot of sense as well. And as we kind of think about AI security, and you talked about it a little bit just now, Crystal. We hear a lot about security fabric and how do we secure that security fabric. Does that kind of align with what you see in the world from your perspective? Like, how do we integrate versus tools that are kind of co-marketed together to create that security fabric to fill that gap?
Yeah, so I think that security fabric is integration, it's shared data and closed feedback loops. I think from our perspective at Sysdig, runtime detection needs to inform pipeline. A pipeline finding needs to change runtime detection patterns versus like co-marketing. That's just like, here's an API call that we have, and we're going to work together now. And we have a co-marketed press release. A security fabric protects the connections between your two organizations, or like I said, the trust boundaries that you have, your those shared credentials for your API calls. that are between your organization's systems and not just the system themselves.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would absolutely double tap on what Crystal said about the trust boundaries between the organizations. And increasingly, when I think about what security fabric means, I really think that it's are the agents and agentic workflows or AI workflows existing on one platform able to safely interact with the workflows on another with scoped inquiries and really specific, again, those credentials that are tightly bound, protecting customer data. So I think that that's increasingly what I think of as well integrated or as an actual security fabric is the ability for automated processes to perform trusted actions.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, and that's what we're seeing here a lot as well when we look at kind of the AI coding boom and securing the coding space is that it's become more of a defense in depth, right? We have to look at not just one part of code or developers or security piece. We really have to tie in all the integrations and tie in every piece of information we can to kind of increase that. Um, but with that said, as AI generated code is kind of a reality in a lot of enterprises, and enterprises are looking to kind of adopt that. Crystal, what is your approach to securing that type of code? How does that differ from just regular human code?
So I'm going to look at this from a different perspective. I'll let Kyle take the AI generated code version. I'm going to go to the post compromise side of code for a sec, because I work with our threat research team. So I look a lot at what attackers are doing with AI generated code, not necessarily what developers are doing with AI generated code. So we're sorting through the taxonomy of what it looks like with threat actors using LLMs to generate code, and how we can find them in our environments. What does that look like and how can we detect them? Because that is also an AI code problem. And their scripts look different, and there are ways to find them. A scanner is going to fire on known bad problems, whether it's a human generated code or AI generated code, it doesn't matter. But they do look different. We did actually find one that was really easy to distinguish the difference between a human and a machine. And it was so obvious, and we were so excited to see this. There were several threat actors that actually figured out how to jailbreak LLMs by prompting the LLMs to say, I'm doing a capture the flag. And it's for, educational purposes. And I want to use this, CVE 2026, whatever, to exploit, I don't know, this line flow vulnerability. And these LLMs were giving them this exploit code, and they're using them against these actual victims. But these LLMs were actually leaking the CVE that the attacker gave them into not just the user agent script, but like the password field, the role session name, the account creation alias, like every single part of the malware script that the LLM was creating, that CVE was in every single part of it, which is fantastic for us as defenders, because that's really easy for us to create detections to be able to find these AI generated scripts. Really unfortunate that attackers can so easily jailbreak LLMs. There are supposed to be safety mechanisms to stop them from doing this. But fortunately, it's quite easy for us to be able to detect this as well. But we're increasingly seeing attackers using AI generated code for every single aspect of their attacks too, though.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, like I was just saying, and we were just talking about the security fabric, right? Defense in depth, right? That's not something that you might catch early on, but catching it on the back end and then being able to kind of react to that and make sure it doesn't happen again. I think it's a fantastic message around integrations and building a real security fabric. And Kyle, what's your take from the code side?
Yeah, so I think that the solution to the problem Crystal described, of course, is like safeguards and guardrails on the models in order to make sure that when they're prevented from doing something, you can't get them to do it by just saying, imagine if you could. So I think that, better guardrails around the foundation models and the ways that they're utilized are great. But the reality is also that open source models that are very, very powerful exist. And it's unlikely that those types of guardrails are going to be able to be embedded or will be by some that are maybe generated or modified or tuned outside of, general practice organizations and countries. So I think that the answer for development when you're inside an organization is the same. It's guardrails on how these models are developing code. Right now, even when we're doing really shift left DevSecOps, you're still evaluating that code after it's been written, right? And I think that when we approach AI development, you need to put those controls and processes and analyses in place before that gets into your repo or before it gets into a scenario where it's even a dev environment. You're going to go through the same processes on the other side of that through your CI/CD pipelines and all of the types of scanners and discovery models that you would use anyway. But for AI development, you want to make sure that you are both using a model that is trusted and has high security evaluations for its coding output. And secondarily, you want to make sure that your developers have a internal or organizational level policies or skills that describe the ways that they need to build that code.
Yeah, and I think two things you mentioned there really resonate, right? The shift left mantra no longer applies, right? Because the whole AI coding is everywhere, and how mixed in it is, and our selfless shame plug here, but we launched a shift to AI initiative, which kind of covers what you just talked about, right? We need to put guardrails around it at every stage we can to make sure we're capturing every piece of that puzzle. So with that said, Kyle, HackerOne, you guys specifically kind of bring human adversarial intelligence into the mix, right? So what are you guys finding in those AI attack surfaces that automated tooling of the past just kind of misses now?
Yeah, and I think this is one of those areas where, as much as everything changes, some things always stay the same, and where the HackerOne community has always shined and probably will always shine is in finding novel attack surfaces and threats that these automated systems, which are generally pattern or experiential based, can't find because there isn't a pattern or an experience in order to base that discovery on. And so what we found is that the researchers powered with AI capabilities are able to discover what are, again, existing flaws within code or configuration sets, but they may be able to access them or chain them together in more interesting ways that an automated system wouldn't be able to catch because it sees it as three separate things. And so I think that that's really where both the community has always been important in these novel discoveries, and they're going to continue to be important there, right? We are really excited to be able to improve the researcher experience across the platform and make sure that they're able to really discover the novel vulnerabilities that are going to catch people off guard otherwise.
Very cool. Just if kind of ask a quick follow-up question on that, like, are you when your community is reporting back things like bugs or stuff, has that the type of reporting or the types of bugs that they're catching changed since AI coding has become kind of the norm, or is it mostly stayed the same and just accelerated in terms of number, or has it accelerated at all?
Oh, it's absolutely accelerated. So I think submissions are up something like 76%. And, there are some really large numbers around what looks like AI submission versus AI assisted submission. And then I think that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But for a lot of what's coming in right now, it's those types of chained exploits or the things where two mediums are now a full cross account takeover. I think that that's an area that we're seeing an expansion in, um, pretty specifically. But again, these are still the same flaws that we've always had.
Same flaws, just more.
Yeah.
um, Awesome. And Crystal, so on your side from the Sysdig end, we've already talked about this a little bit in terms of how you guys do defense around runtime and capturing that LLM flaw. But rather than being in a safety net, you've kind of framed it as that ultimate layer of truth, right? So we see what's happening in reality. We see what's actually reaching the end state. And every threat eventually does manifest itself in production. Otherwise, it's not a true threat, right? But from your perspective, what does production level visibility reveal that earlier pipeline controls we just can't catch?
So runtime is where predictions from upstream controls, your SAST scans, your image policies, where those become reality. Those upstream are your predictions, and runtime is what's happening. So whether or not those predictions are actually going to happen, was your prediction right? The image scan can be clean, but then in production, that image can still make an outbound call that from an unfamiliar domain. Credential that was clean past your policies can still be used in data exfiltration because it was stolen by an attacker. So your runtime insights are used for behavior pattern analysis when all else fails. We've seen cloud threats happen in an average of like 10 minutes. This is the research over the last 4 years. There was one recently from an agentic threat actor, just a recent vulnerability. The vulnerability was exploited like 10 hours after disclosure on GitHub. And after the attacker used the initial access, they had credentials taken from the victim environment within 3 minutes. So having runtime detection, again, once they have access into the environment, runtime detections, being able to detect those things in real time, and then pairing that with, this is a whole nother discussion to get into, but autonomous response actions, being able to contain some kind of action like that in real time based on some kind of source of truth where you're confident that this is happening in your production environment. Pairing those kinds of behaviors together will give you the ability to stop those kinds of attacker behaviors in a span of minutes. And that's why we ground what we do in runtime detections.
Great points there. Like you said, from a code scanning and early on standpoint, like we can detect the flaws, we can detect the vulnerabilities, we can attempt to guesstimate or estimate how exploitable they're going to be and what they're going to be in the end state. But without that final check on the end and monitoring, you don't have full coverage, right? So I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. As we look at kind of the landscape right now and where we are from a security standpoint, right? I feel that like tool sprawl is one of the biggest things that come up when we talk to customers, right? A lot of security teams out there, they've got 5, 6, maybe dozen tools even to monitor different aspects of security, and they're just drowning in alerts from disconnected tools. So what Crystal, what kind of honest advice can you give to customers who are trying to consolidate without losing that coverage?
First of all, make sure your tools are talking to each other at the very least. Don't keep adding queues to your security team, first of all. You could prioritize finding detection gaps and cover those first versus trying to find and fill vendor gaps. Adding tools to vendor gaps isn't going to help you. I would prioritize coverage gaps first and foremost. A lot of organizations, if you sit and assess your tools, you're going to have 5 tools that cover the same 3 categories, but they could be blind at runtime visibility. And those are the kinds of signals where you're not going to see or stop attackers. So really, you just need to sit down and assess what every vendor is giving you, and then kind of get rid of that overlap and see what kind of detection coverage you have first.
Yeah, makes sense. Kyle, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I want to double tap on the if you have to make a choice, definitely address discovery coverage first. Absolutely, you want to close, especially now as we talk about how easy it is to exploit existing flaws that are already in code bases. You want to make sure that you're closing any discovery gaps as soon as possible. The nice thing, though, is that a lot of those discovery mechanisms and tools are largely available across a number of platforms, and as Crystal mentioned, likely to be included in any of the 5 vendors that a lot of people are going to be choosing from. It's just going to be about that. Is it configured and integrated into your environment enough in order to perform the discovery that it needs to? And then is it communicating back to both your internal systems and your other vendors where that information would add a significant amount of data? Now, of course, running something like a bug bounty program or a pen test, the more information we have about an asset from the more aspects of discovery, the more that we can tune that program best for our community, as well as leverage the agentic capabilities around validating and prioritizing these exploits and discovered findings.
Gotcha. So we've covered a lot today, right? And the last thing I want to ask both of you is just kind of a call to action, right? For all the CISOs in the audience and security practitioners, after they leave today, what do you think is the one thing they should do differently on Monday morning to build to start building a more cohesive security fabric? And Kyle, I'll let you start with that one.
Okay. This might be a hot take, but I think that right now, somebody leading a large security organization needs to really have a clear line between where they want humans and where they want both AI automation and machine automation to be leveraged. Where are those decision points that you really just can't leave to the machine to make? And how do you prepare the people that need to make them with the best data, the best interconnectedness, and the best autonomy in order to go make those changes themselves? I think that sort of the future of security teams is that security engineers are going to move from a notification and guidance perspective more to a corrective action. And I think that delineating where humans do act behavior and where you're going to let your agents take care of things is really important right now.
Awesome, Crystal.
This is a really easy one for me because I'm going to pull a question from one of my favorite CISO mentors. He always says, "What don't I know that I should know?" So to answer that question, pull an attack from your business sector that has happened in the last 6 to 12 months. So it's fairly recent. Walk it backwards through your environment. Where would you have stopped it? Where you stand right now? And then how could you have stopped it earlier in your environment? That exact attack, all of its TTPs, whatever you can find in threat intelligence for that attack. You'll find pipeline and runtime gaps in your environment. I can almost guarantee it. Close those patches, those gaps, whatever AI code risks there are, supply chain controls that there may be, trust boundary issues, identity flaws. You will find gaps related to that, whatever that attack is that you chose. I can almost guarantee it. These things happen all the time. So that's what I suggest. What don't you know that you should know, and base it off of a real attack that is directly related to your business.
That's fantastic, and appreciate that advice from both of you. And like I said, we've covered a lot here, and I think that this entire conversation really does highlight why a fragmented approach just does not work in the AI era, right? There's just so much to it, so many areas that you need to look at, and that you can't secure, machine speed development with just isolated tooling alone. Um, Connecting that human ingenuity from HackerOne and that ultimate layer of truth from Sysdig, I think that creates a great unified defense and security fabric conversation, and that feeds critical context right back into the development lifecycle and helps people to actually secure their environments. So again, thank you, Crystal and Kyle, for both your expertise and your practical insights that you shared with us today. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And I will hand things over to Monica to introduce our next session.